Hi, it's Roz. It's the beginning of April, the sun is shining, and I thought I'd do a little bit of a recap of March because I haven't done a lot of filming in March because it's been an odd month, let's face it. I'm sure that's the same for lots of you out there. Um, but it's not been a bad reading month for me in the sense of I've read some really good things, but I'm not sure I've been as good a reader as usual, if you know what I mean. Going back to the beginning of the month, which seems like a world away now, I read a book from Cyprus called Leader Street, short stories, and a book from Ireland, Actress by Anne Enright, and I did a very jolly scallywandling video about those two, so I won't talk about them now. Just after that, I had a bit of an adventure to London with Tilly to go to the book launch of The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, and that really does seem like that was in another world. You know, that I could travel up to London. I went on the underground, joined a crowd of people out in Piccadilly, which is one of the busiest streets in London, queued up with loads of people. It's like, wow, was that really less than a month ago? Yes, it was. And I'm very happy that I got to do that. But because a matter of days later, I guess that would have been unthinkable. And although that cloud was looming, I guess we weren't quite taking it properly seriously at that moment. Or, I don't know, we didn't know how it was going to hit in the UK at that point. But on that happy evening, Tilly and I had also made sure that we both read our play of the month, and because it was March and of March Mystery Madness, we read The Witness for the Prosecution by Agatha Christie, and we sat in a coffee shop again in Piccadilly and talked about that together, and we both really enjoyed reading it. And I'll link to the video for that, which is one of Tilly and I doing this kind of discussing drama thing, and I'll link to the video below because it's on Tilly's channel, not mine. So that was a really happy evening, and yeah, before things shifted. It's not the only play I read this month. Also, kind of early in the month, I read Electra by Euripides. Now, I'm on a bit of a kind of Greek drama thing at the moment, and discussing it, some of them on Voxer with Lukash and Madeline and a few other booktubers, which is really nice. Although we're giving it a rest this month because now none of us is quite in the mood, I think. Electra was a good play, an interesting play. Uh, Not long before, the month before I read Medea by Euripides, and the month before that, Trojan Women by Euripides. Trojan Women was very moving. Medea is wonderfully peculiar, and she is such an extraordinary character. Electra was not as thrilling and fascinating in a way, although perfectly good play. And interestingly, I read The Libation Bearers by Aeschylus, which is basically the same story. And what was fun in the Euripides version was that he actually at one point kind of is like making fun of Aeschylus's version. Which, yeah, you kind of forget that they were operating, they were aware of each other's work, although Euripides was younger than Aeschylus. Now, I might try to read the Sophocles version of the same story, the Electra and Orestes story, just to kind of get all three versions, or three surviving kind of versions of that story in Greek drama. And if I do, I'll come back here with it. But yeah, so that was enjoyable. And then I then around the same time embarked on reading Till by Daniel Kelman. Now, this was my German book of the month, because if you don't know, and you probably do, Britta Boller and Mel, two booktubers of sort of German origin, are doing a kind of a year of getting us all to try and read more German books, or books in the German language, and I've embraced that, and I think I'm going to give it a go to read one each month. And Till was a big book in the German-speaking world a couple of years ago, maybe 2016, 17, but the translation into English has only just come out, and this is it. And I got this out of the library, and normally it would have had to go back to the library by now, but of course all the libraries are closed, so I still have it, which was nice because it means that Steve and Alfred have both been able to read the same book without getting rushed back. I really enjoyed Till, but it is my sort of book. It's my sort of book because it's historical fiction, but not the kind of standard, straightforward, I don't know, Bernard Cromwell style or whatever, or historical fiction. It's sort of very much the sort of non-linear, bit odd, really, yes, unpredictable historical fiction, I suppose. And it's set in the 30 Years' War, and the character Till is he's taken from German folklore, and there's this folklore figure, Till Eulenspiegel. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Eulenspiegel, perhaps, which means, I think, means owl mirror. Anyway, he's a medieval German folklore figure of kind of mayhem and misrule, who's a wanderer, and goes around playing tricks on people, and associated with the plague years, and I think it was written about in maybe the 16th century, but the stories are older. And what Kelman does is transposes him into the 17th century and the time of the 30 Years' War, but he's still this kind of figure of mayhem that goes around causing trouble, and as a way of showing a period of sort of war, and the plague was back then, of course, because plague often goes with wars, and the sort of chaos that war generated, or particularly the 30 Years' War generated in Europe. The device of using Till works really well, I felt. So he keeps popping up in different situations. So like every sort of notable event of the 30 Years' War, somehow or other, he's there, he's involved, he's interacts with all the major figures, whether that's Gustav Adolphus, the Swedish king who came in and won a lot of battles around Europe. Frederick the Elector Palatine, who becomes king, the Winter King of Bohemia, which kind of really was kicked off the war. Elizabeth Stuart, the English princess who was married to Frederick. All these sort of real historical figures appear, and Till kind of has his finger in every pie, but and doesn't play by the rules. And a satisfying book which I enjoyed a lot. The other thing I would say about this is that the translator, whose name I think is Ross Benjamin, really good translation. When you kind of forget that the book's translated and you just enjoy it, and you're not wondering, is this the writer's thought, the translator's thought, if there's something unfelicitous, is it meant to be like that? No, this was first-rate translation. So good book if you can get hold of it. You can't get it from our library because this is going to be stuck in my house until the library reopens, who knows when. So that was an enjoyable book. But around the time that I was finishing Till, it had a certain appropriateness, because it is about like a world being thrown into disarray, and that was what was happening around in real life at the same time, I guess. But that didn't stop me reading. But what I was reading at that point was Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, and it was lovely to escape into the world of Tudor England, because having read Wolf Hall and Bring Up the Bodies in January and February, I was very immersed in that, and that was a real refuge and a joy. It did mean, I think, that I was a less analytical reader, and I've talked about that. I did a kind of a roundup video for Cromwellathon, talking about the mirror and the light, and whereas I might have kind of unpicked it and done it in section by section, really all I could do was just crack on and enjoy reading it and lose myself in it and not think about it too hard, because that was all my kind of brain was fit for, because of being caught up in other things, but a lot of work related things to do with coronavirus. One thing that I did find was I was meant to be reading another chunk of Ulysses by James Joyce in March, and which I did at the beginning of the month, and then by the middle of the month, when everything was kind of going pear-shaped, I just found I couldn't. It's not that I'm not enjoying Ulysses, because I really, really am, and I will come back to it in a few weeks' time, I think. But it just needs a quality of attention that my brain has not been able to give it this month. So that's what I mean about me reading lots of good things this month, but not being as good a reader. The kind of end of the month, I therefore was very happy to kind of retreat into a bit of a comfort read. I didn't know perhaps it was going to be a comfort read, but it really was, and that was Walking Home by Simon Armitage, which was my non-fiction book of the month. And what he does in this book is he sets off to walk the Pennine Way, which is a national trail in the UK. And if you're not local, it kind of goes from the border with Scotland, just into Scotland it starts, and comes down like the Pennines, like the hills that are like the spine of the north of England, and all the way down to Edale in Derbyshire. And he actually, the place where he was born and the place where he lives are kind of quite close to that walk. And it's like it's a travelogue. He's a poet. He's doing what he's doing is he set it up so he did readings in each place that he stopped, in return for sort of his bed for the night, his meal, and put a walking sock round the audience for contributions to like a troubadour, he calls it. Yes, travels with a troubadour on the Pennine Way. It was seeing could he do it, and yes he could, and he's very good humoured and affable and fun, and he moans about getting lost and getting stuck in peat bogs, and equally has kind of moments of transcendent delight at the beauty of the English countryside, and some of the places that he walked, I've walked, and I know, like he walks on a bit of Hadrian's Wall and stays in the youth hostel where I stayed with Tilly one time, and has a meal in the pub where she and I also had a post-walk feast. So yeah, nice feeling of connection. No intellectual challenge in this, but a lot of pleasure. So thank you, Simon. Because the other lovely thing that Simon did for us this month was he wrote a beautiful poem for the beginning of lockdown, which Tilly and I did a little video about. When she was my last chance to see her before she disappeared into the maelstrom of coronavirus. So that was nice too. So that's two lovely things that Simon Armitage, the poet, has done for me this month. Third lovely thing that he did for me, and I'm feeling very grateful to Simon, he's now my mate, I think, was he gave me some lovely poetry to read, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And I'd had in mind to read this because I've been reading last month in February some Icelandic sagas as part of Sagalong, and that made me want to visit some English stories of not exactly, around the same period actually, although I think the Icelandic ones are based on older tales, whereas Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is kind of high medieval sort of stuff. The Simon, it's written in Old English or Middle English. God, I should know that, shouldn't I? Like Chaucer. Same thing as Chaucer. And so you can, in the original, you can understand some of it, and other bits you're done for. If you've ever tried reading Chaucer, you'll know that. But Simon Armitage was like he was born to translate this story, I think, because it's set in his part of the world in the north of England. The style, I guess, is kind of quite it matches happily with his style and enthusiasms as a poet. You get some versions of old stories by contemporary poets where they use the stories as a jumping off point, and that's a lovely thing. I've enjoyed that a lot. I read an Alice Oswald collection recently that was based around all the people that died in the Trojan War, that are named as having fallen in the Trojan War. That was fascinating. But and it wasn't a kind of like a translation of Homer. It was like her own thing, inspired by the Iliad, if that makes sense. This is really this is Armitage trying to do a faithful translation, but as a poet. So bringing, like, making it a poem still, because sometimes when you're translating poetry, it's Steve Donohue's been talking about this on his March of the Penguins Penguin Classic series. It's like, if you're translating poetry, do you translate it quite literally and maybe turn it into prose but get the meaning of the original, or do you write your own poem but try and capture some of the sort of poetic characteristics of the original, which is the right thing to do? And there's arguments in both directions, aren't there? And Armitage has sort of struck that middle course, I suppose, between those two, and I think successfully, of trying to capture the poetic characteristics of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. The writer of the original is an anonymous 14th century person, we don't know the name, by using a lot of alliteration, which is really strong in the original. But when he needs to sort of it's not a word-for-word translation, so he allows himself to venture away a bit from the original to make a poem that works as a poem, but captures some of the feeling of the original poem. Does that make sense? I'm not sure I explained that very well. I loved it. It was a joy. Sir Gawain himself is a bit of a prig. Some of the best bits of the poem are he's at this castle of this mysterious knight who has a beautiful wife, and the mysterious knight goes off hunting every day and leaves him on his own, kind of in the castle with all the ladies of the castle. And his wife, the knight's wife, kind of comes to Gawain in bed and basically tries to tempt him into having sex with her, basically. Yeah. And his resistance is most entertaining, because he thinks of himself as a very pure and noble knight. He's devoted to Virgin Mary and is the epitome of chivalry in King Arthur's round table. But he does slip up, but not in the way that you might think. Good story, great kind of ending, beautiful descriptions of nature. It's really lovely, isn't it, when you connect with someone from hundreds of years ago, because they share something that you love too. So this poet writing about the seasons and nature, you just think, he loves those things, the birds, the flowers, the same way that I do, and you're reminded that we're not so different. So that was my reading in March, and now it's April, and the sun is shining, and I'm looking for sort of positivity and optimism despite being stuck in my house and working from home and it all being a bit weird. And I've got some lovely reading plans, and reading plan number one is that Tilly and I have been scheming today about what our discussing drama play should be, and I'm sharing this up front because what we've decided to do is we're going to read One Man, Two Governors, which is by Richard Bean, but is based on the 18th century Italian play A Servant of Two Masters. Now, the reason we're doing that is because the National Theatre here in the UK, obviously they've had to close because of coronavirus, and what they're doing is they're releasing for a week on YouTube each week in April a production from the last few years, a recording thereof, and these were ones that were put out on National Theatre Live, which where they show plays in cinemas. One Man, Two Governors is a very, very funny play. I was lucky enough to see a live production, this production of it that they're going to show. They're showing now in the theatre, and we thought it would be fun to read that, talk about it, and say, why not watch it? Our BookTube friends, watch it. It's just up there for a week this week till Thursday the 8th of April. So watch it now, and Tilly and I'll be also reading it, watching it, and talking about it. And I think I'll try and read the 18th century Goldini play that it's based on as well. Why not? So that's a plan for April. The thing I'm reading right now this instant is Stiff Upper Lip, Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse. Now, I did Steve Donohue's coronavirus book tag about a month ago, and I said one of the things in that was to give your quarantine book list, you know, what you'd take with you to read in quarantine. And I said that I thought if I was quarantined, I might need to cheer myself up by reading some Jeeves and Wooster by P.G. Wodehouse, and I am holed up now, and that's what I'm reading, and it's as lovely as I hoped it would be. I've got some other nice plans for reading. I like to try and read one non-fiction thing each month, but I don't want anything too heavy this month because, as I say, my brain is not very focused. So I'm going to read Bedsit Disco Queen by Tracy Thorn, and she this is her memoir, and she says how I grew up and tried to be a pop star, and I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be fun. I'll let you know. I try to read something from a new country, like by someone from a country where I've never read anything by someone from that country before each month. That's a very long way of saying that. I'm going to read Told by Starlight in Chad by Joseph Brahim Said. I think Tilly gave me this for Christmas, and there's not a lot of books around from Chad, and this is one of the, or in English, and this is one of the few, so going to read that one. I've got a couple of like new releases, as it were, that I'm going to read. One is Here We Are by Graham Swift, and the other is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I'm particularly looking forward to that one. It's about Shakespeare. Well, it's about Anne Hathaway, Shakespeare's wife and son Hamnet, kind of like a story from their perspective. I can't wait. That's going to be good, I hope. I always try and read some poetry each month. I've got Seamus Heaney on the brain at the moment because there was a really good documentary about him that was shown on BBC TV not that long ago, and I've picked out The Hall Lantern by him, which is a collection of his from the 1980s, which I've never read, so I'm looking forward to that. Got a few other things in mind. I'm going to take up Brian's suggestion that I should read some Balzac. So I think I'm going to read The Wrong Side of Paris. I'm looking forward to that. I need to read a German book because it's Read German Books Year, as we know. So and I think that's going to be Melina by Ingeborg Bachmann. I think either Brit might have recommended that. Someone recommended it, and yeah, so I think I'm going to give that a go. And and another nice relaxing thing, another thing that I did say on the coronavirus tag was that when I want a bit of a rest with reading, a nice murder mystery is good. So I've got a Tana French Dublin Murder Squad one lined up, The Secret Place. So there's that. And well, that's a few things to keep me busy. I'll probably find the odd other thing as well. So that's my plan for April. See you all soon. Tilly and I will do a discussing drama video about One Man, Two Governors within the next few days, so that there's time for people to get to watch the play before it disappears off YouTube on at the end of the day on Thursday the 8th. Okay, bye.